Hey there, it's Simon Hurley from Inklips and welcome to another video. I'm doing a live stream tonight, sharing a lot of different stamping tips. This is one of the most requested videos that I've had. I get a lot of questions of people wondering how to get better stamped images or trying to solve some problems they have when stamping. So I'm going to do this video live, but kind of like a regular video, so I won't be answering a ton of questions, but at one certain point in the video I will. So be sure to leave your questions over in the chat, and if I look over to the side, I'm looking at people asking questions, but for the most part, I want this to be really watchable for the people who see it in the future. So I'm going to be sharing lots of tips for stamping, so get ready, and if you have any more tips you want to share or questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer those. So now I'm going to turn down my work surface and I'll share lots of different tips. Okay, so when stamping, I want to just quickly compare the types of stamps you can get, as this is really important to the different results you'll get when you're stamping. So there's clear stamp sets and there is cling rubber stamp sets. Now the cling rubber stamps have this little cling on it, and this helps it get a really great impression, and also the rubber holds the ink really nicely. Yeah, I love this set from Tim Holtz. And then there's also clear stamp sets. Now I prefer photopolymer stamp sets, and I'll explain that in just a second. But these are clear stamps, so you can see through them really nicely. They don't hold ink as nicely, but they're really nice because they're see-through, and you can compact a lot and store a ton at once, which is one of my favorite parts. So the reason why I like photopolymer cling stamp sets is because they hold the ink better. So the photopolymer material holds the ink better than an acrylic material or a silicone material that some stamps are made out of. So usually if they're around the $15 price range for this medium-sized stamp set, that's usually a photopolymer stamp set, and usually it'll say it on websites as well. So I'll open it up here. Photopolymer stamps are a bit more sticky, I find, and also they're not super stretchy. So some stamps are like super stretchable and bendable. These aren't as much, and they're really sticky on the back here. So this will stick to my finger, and it really sticks nicely to an acrylic block. And also a tip, if the photopolymer stamps aren't sticking as well as they used to anymore, peel it off its backing sheet, and you can clean it with just some soap and water, let them sit out and dry, and then put them back on the sheet. So then they'll regain their stickiness. If they've lost that, it just means there's a little layer of dust or mildew on the back. So I'll stick that right back onto the stamp set. And then it's really easy to store. I just keep mine in these little Avery Elle storage pockets, and this was a recommendation from Jennifer McGuire, and I really love it. So I'm going to set these off to the side, and then we can get on with some of the stamping techniques and my tips that I'm going to share. So the first tip that I have is for stamping solid images. So I'm going to bring in this Altenew Hope stamp set, and we're going to stamp this because it's fairly solid of an image. So I'll pull this out here. And then I'm going to grab this. So there's a couple ways you can do stamping. You can use an acrylic block, which is probably the most known way and the first way to stamp. So my tip for getting a really great impression when you're stamping solid images, actually I have a couple. So when you're going to want to apply your stamp, don't just stick it down like that. Because although it's sticking onto here, it's not going to give you as good of an effect as if you take it, and you're going to want to start from one end and just press it down. And this is making sure that I'm getting all the air bubbles out, and that'll provide a much better image when I'm stamping. So you can see that there's barely any air bubbles inside there, and that really helps when stamping solid images. Sometimes you can get some funky shapes inside there if you just stick it on like that. So sometimes sticking it like that might really help. Another way to get a really good solid image if you're struggling with it is using a clear mark ink pad. Now here is one from Nuvo. You can also use Versamark ink. And I'm just going to apply a nice layer of that onto the stamp. And then kind of rub it off like this. And this is just kind of pushing it into the stamp there. And when I'm pushing that ink into the stamp, it'll kind of set it for the other inks. So it'll kind of prepare the stamp for later on. Now usually I just go straight into stamping. Sometimes there might be some residues on the stamp from the factory or things like that. You can use some stamp cleaner or water to clean that off as well. But I don't find too many problems with that. but some people find that their ink doesn't stick super well, so you can try a couple different ways to do that. I'm kind of just running through every different way I can think of really making this stamp really nicely. So I'm going to pull out a piece of cardstock here. Now the paper really matters too. I use the Neenah 110 pound cardstock, and that's really great for stamping your cards or anything like that. But I know there's a lot of great white cardstocks out there as well. I just really recommend this for making cards. So I'm going to pull out an ink pad here, and I'm going to share how to stamp with just an ink like this. Now here are a few brands that I have. This is the Hero Arts, Simon Says Stamp, and Umbrella Crafts from scrapbook.com. Now the thing about these ink pads, you can hear my dog trying to get in here. So the thing about these ink pads is that they will smooth out over time and smooth into the surface of the paper and give you a much more solid image. So right at first, you might not notice that they give a really solid impression, but they do after a little while. So I'll use this one first, and I have a fun story for this after I stamp it too. So I'm just going to move my chair back. I find that when stamping with an acrylic block, you need to give it a lot of pressure too. So I just apply the ink, pat it down first. Sometimes you can twist the ink pad too. And then I just tap it all off here to make sure that it'll stamp nice and solid and there won't be any lines in it. So then I'll stamp this down onto the surface here. And when you're pressing it down, you're going to want to make sure you can see that every part is touching the cardstock there. And there you can see my stamped image. I'm going to have to open the door quickly, just 1 second. Okay, so now both of them decided to come in here. So you might hear some little paw prints walking around on the floor. So here is this stamped image here. Now I'm going to share one that I did earlier. This is the more solid impression. This is what it looks like after it smooths out and dries. So you can see, he wanted to go out now. So you can see that you get a different image once it's all dry. So this one's a little bit more splotchy, and this one's a little bit smoothed out more. So you can see it really smooths into that cardstock, and the more time you give it to sit and kind of smooth in, the more smooth it'll be. Now, I want to explain another thing too. You don't always need to buy reinkers when you get these inks. I buy a lot of different ink colors, and I have bought this one right at the beginning. I bought this 4 years ago when I first started, and this thing is still really juicy, and I haven't once re-inked it. So what you can do is buy lots of different colors, and I find that with this formulation, it really works nicely. So the ink pads really stay nice and juicy, so you can buy a lot of different colors, and if you really need a re-inker later down the road, you can buy one. But like I said, I bought this 4 years ago. I used it super heavily. It was one of my only ink pads, and it's still working really nicely, and it's still pretty juicy too. So that's just a tip. If you want to save a little bit money, you don't have to buy the re-inkers at first. Okay, so now back down to our workspace here. So you can see we got a pretty solid impression there at first. However, if you have a pretty solid desk or things like that, and you want to make sure that your stamping is even better, you can bring in a piece of fun foam or a little fun foam mat or something. That'll help give a really nice solid image. Because the rubber stamps have that cling foam on it, this replaces that cling foam for the clear stamps. And when you press it down into the surface, you can get a similar impression that you get with a cling stamp, because that kind of adds that cling and it'll kind of sink into there too when you stamp it down. So that can also help get a better impression too. And I'll share more about that a little bit later. So next, I'm going to move on to stamping down some lined images that you don't want a little halo around. This is probably one of the biggest complaints that I get, that people are stamping their images down and they're getting little halos around them and kind of wondering why. So I'll bring out one of these images, this little dolphin here, and these are pretty fine line images, but they've got a lot of space in between them there. So I'm going to grab out an acrylic block, and I'll stick it right down here. And again, I'll just press it down, because especially on a stamp like this where that inside part is kind of cut out, You want to make sure that all the air bubbles are out of there, and that'll give a really great impression. Okay, so when I stamp this image down, I'm going to stamp it down onto a piece of cardstock, and I'll show what not to do first, and then I'll kind of help to kind of fix that problem. And I'll share another way to fix it in a little bit as well, with a fun tool. So I'm just going to ink this up with black ink here. This is Nuvo's black ink, so it's a hybrid ink. And then I'll stamp it down. And this is what not to do, remember. So you can see, it might be a little hard to see on camera, but I'll lift it up really close there. You can see there's a little halo around the image, and it's not super noticeable. You can always get away with it, but it's not giving you a super crisp and clean image. And if it might have been a smaller image, you might have gotten even more of a halo. Now the thing wrong that I did there is I pressed the stamp and I rocked it a little bit. And by rocking that stamp, you get more of the impression that you want. Now this isn't as easy to do with cling stamps or things like that, but when you're using a clear stamp, since it's kind of more of a squishy material, it's easier to do that with, especially if the stamp isn't photopolymer. Usually photopolymer works a little bit better, so you don't have to worry about it a ton. But then I'm going to stamp it down, and I'm just going to go straight down, press it down, hold it there for a second, and then I'll lift it back up. So you can see it's more of a fine line image, and you don't get as much of a solid line. Well, it's a solid line, but it's thinner like the designer was supposed to be. So you get a lot thinner of an image, and it's also a lot more crisp and clean there too. So that's how to stamp without the halos. And I'll share another thing with that right now. So I'm going to grab a smaller acrylic block here, and I'm going to grab one of these really tiny sentiments. Now these can be a really big culprit of stamping badly. So the hard part about these is that they're so tiny and they're such small font that they can be hard to stamp. So here's what not to do. That is actually not too bad, but I rocked the stamp a little bit there, so it's a lot thicker than it should be. It's kind of hard to replicate it because there are certain times that you get worse images, but this one is a little bit thinner and again more crisp. It's not super noticeable on camera, but sometimes if you press too much on one of these little images, if you press down too much, it can really make the image too thick and kind of almost unreadable with that little halo there. So I just want to let you guys know that just a little bit of pressure with these sentiments or stamps like this gives you the look that you're supposed to have. So you don't need to apply a ton of pressure unless if you're stamping a really solid image where it can handle that. If it's lined images like this, you just want to give it that little pressure and then lift up. So then you don't get that really kind of smushed image with that little halo around it. So let's move on to the next tutorial, or the next technique, sorry. So I want to share quickly how to, well actually now I'm going to share a tool that really changed the game for me. So these are stamping tools. These are the Tonic Tim Holtz stamping tools. I know there's a lot of different ones on the market, but these ones are super nice, and I'm going to share some of the ways that I use them that have really helped me out with stamping, and also those last couple techniques that I shared, you can even make them easier inside of here, and these really do help you out. I always say I would not be a stamper without one of these. They really help me out, and sometimes I reach for these more than acrylic blocks because they really do help you with stamping and give that even pressure. So I'm going to use the smaller one in today's video, but you guys can decide if you want one of these, which one you might want or need. They're both really great. This one I like for card making and traveling, and it also fits on your desk really nicely. So I'll set the other one off to the side here. This is the little travel platform. So I want to share quickly how to stamp with this. This is a stamping tool. It's got foam on the back here, so it's not going to scratch your surface of your desk, and it'll stay in place really nicely. Now this lid, you can stamp with clear or rubber stamps. It has little markings on the lid there. This side says clear and this one says rubber. So if you can read clear and you're going to use clear stamps, that's great. And if you want to use rubber stamps, you lift it up to this angle, lift it right out, place it back in at this angle, and then place it back down. So now we're at that rubber side and it stamps with those thick cling rubber stamps. So I'm going to quickly share what this really helps with if you're really trying to get a better stamped impression. There's a lot of different techniques you can do in this, but I'm just really going to share how to get a great stamped impression inside of here. So I'll open it up here. You can then place your piece of cardstock right on the inside. And then I can stamp my images down. So I'm going to go in with this little whale image. And I'm also going to go in with a little sentiment here. And I'll share what I really like about this. So I'm going to turn this over here. Again, we're on the clear side. I'll press it down. Now, one thing about this is it picks up the stamp, like I just kind of shared. You want to really press it down. So after I've applied that, I'm just pressing the stamp down again, just in those areas where the stamping tool can't press it down for you. You just want to make sure you get all those bubbles up for really good stamping. So then I'm going to grab my black ink pad again, and I'll ink this up. I think there's, oh no, that's in that stamp. Okay, so once that's all inked up, I can then stamp it down. Now you're going to still want to give this that good amount of pressure, but the really nice part about this is if you do press down super hard on this, it's built up on both sides. So no matter how much pressure you give yourself, you always get the same amount of pressure there, so it'll always give you a nice stamped image. So I can really press this down super hard, and it really gives you that nice, crisp, lined image and doesn't affect your stamping. So I don't get that really thick stamped image like this. It doesn't look like this. It's a lot thinner, and that's how the design's supposed to be. And also that sentiment is a lot more readable too. So no matter how hard you press it down in there, you can press however much you want, and that those walls on the outside that are built up are gonna really protect your stamped image and keep it really nice. So that's one thing I love about this. Now another thing here is if I'm going into stamp, I'll put another piece of paper down. And if I'm going in to stamp an image, I'll go in with a cling stamp now. So I can demonstrate that too for those people who love the cling stamps. So I love these stamps from Tim Holtz. I just cannot get enough of them. So I'll grab one of these little dogs off here. And I'll just put that in the center of my cardstock. And again, I'm going to lift up this area. And I'll turn it over to that rubber side. So then I'll add that stamp onto there, and with the cling stamps, you don't really have to press them down again because they're pretty built up with that cling foam there. So now I'm going to just stamp down this dog image, and I'll kind of ink it up a little bit messily, and I'll stamp it down here. So the face there didn't get enough ink, and now if you were just stamping regularly, that would be a problem. But with this, you can go right back in with your ink pad, ink that image up again, and stamp it down. And it'll go exactly in that same spot too, which is really nice. So that really just helps you get that nice stamped impression, and you can keep stamping it over and over, and it'll get darker as you build it up because it's a translucent ink. So as you build up that image, it gets darker and darker. So if you want to, you can go in here again, and you can build up, let's say I wanted the head a little bit darker because I wanted that to stand out. I can go back in and stamp that down and make that even darker of an image. So there you go. That's how you get a really nice stamped impression, even if you didn't ink it up really. Somebody said they have an issue with the stamping platform because it sticks to the card. Well, the magnets really help with holding that down. Sometimes, however, the stamps, the clear stamps, can really stick to it. So once they're inked up, they're fine, but they might stick to it and kind of pull up the paper a little bit. You just have to reposition it back in the corner there and magnet it back down. You can tape it down too, and if you tape it, sometimes it can help it stay down a little bit better. Yeah, you can buy these magnets online. Tonic sells replacements for their tool because I know each tool is a little bit different. So you can find magnets that are for your tool too, or you can always go to the hardware store and find kind of the same width of magnets. So another thing about the stamping tool is I mentioned earlier that if you're using clear stamps, you can use that clear foam or that black foam inside of here to make sure that you get that nice cling there, and if you're stamping a large solid image, you can get a better stamped impression. So I have this piece of fun foam. I have this linked down below, and also be careful with these magnets. Look, I just stuck them together. So you want to make sure that when you take the magnets apart, you pinch them apart like that instead of pulling, and put them far away. Yeah, so if you guys like anything that you see in this video, there are links down below this video to any of the products, and that really helps me out too if you order via my links. So if you want to, it gives me a little percentage without any extra cost to you. So putting this extra piece of fun foam inside of here really helps the stamping. However, if you're using clear stamps with this fun foam inside of here, you want to make sure you have it turned over to the rubber side. With this rubber side on, it gives you a little bit more depth in here, so you can add those clear stamps on, and then this will be that extra cling surface, or that extra, little padded surface that helps you get that stamped image really nice. So I'll go in here with another solid image. I'll bring in this flower again. And I'm just going to set it down onto the surface here. And then I'll put in my piece of paper and magnet down. So I'll just press that into the tool here. And you want to make sure that the sides can still fit around that foam, so you don't want to cut it too close. So then I'll add that image there. And then you can see my magnet went off there. So again, these clear stamps are sticky, so they do move that paper. That's one thing you just kind of want to be careful about when you're using these. So I'll go in with a different color ink here. I'll use this Island Blue ink from Simon Says Stamp. And I'll ink up my stamp here. So this ink pad's a lot juicier than the other one that I used, but I could still get a really good impression with the older one too. So I'll stamp this down. And having that padding behind here really helps you to get a nice stamped impression. And again, this ink smooths into the paper, so any spotty areas that you see here will smooth out over time. So I'll show you guys in just a second what this looks like again. So this really does help get a lot of great stamped impressions. Sometimes when I add something onto the lid here and I'm using a clear stamp, sometimes it doesn't stamp maybe in the center or something like that. So you always, if you need a little bit of help with it, you can always put this piece of fun foam inside of here, turn it to the rubber side, and then you get that cling for your stamps as well, for your clear stamps, which is really nice. Okay, so I think I covered most of the things that I wanted to cover today. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section now. I'll be leaving in just a second here, but I just wanted to kind of bring you guys this fun video tonight, sharing lots of different stamping techniques you can do and a couple different ways and techniques to really improve your stamping. So I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for stopping by. Just looking at your guys' comments here, everybody's talking about the different magnets as well. And another thing with the magnets too, if you find that these do move a lot and you're having trouble kind of keeping them apart, what you can do is take some tape here. I like this yellow frog tape for this, just because it's the right width for this. So I just take some of that frog tape, I place my magnet right inside there, and then you can wrap the magnet up inside that tape. And then I just cut off the little excess. Here I'll just rip it. But that gives you this nice little handle. So if you're handling these magnets a lot, inside of your tool here, I'll flip it back down to the surface so you guys can see. If you're using your tool a lot, you have this nice handle. So if you need to lift your magnet up, it's much easier to lift it or separate them when you have a little handle on your magnet like this too. So that tape works really well for making little handles on your magnets as well and keeping them nice and separated. So I'm glad that you guys are conversing down there. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a big thumbs up. That always really helps me out. And also be sure to click that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment down there on some of your favorite stamping techniques as well. I would love to hear them down below, or if anything you're struggling with stamping, and I'll try to get back to you down in the comments below as well. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. I have a video ready pretty soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.